My wife cheated on me with a friend she told me not to worry about. She cheated in my house while our daughter was inside. My life felt like a scene out of a perfect picture. I had a loving wife named Sarah and a wonderful daughter named Emily. Sarah and I first crossed paths during a blind date set up by some mutual friends. I can recall that evening as if it happened just yesterday. The moment I laid eyes on her, I was captivated by her warm smile and kind, inviting eyes. We spent the entire night chatting, feeling like we were the only two souls in the room. After the party, we exchanged contact information, and soon after, we began dating. Our dates were filled with laughter and deep conversations. We relished simple pleasures, like strolling through the park, sipping coffee at a charming little cafe, or cozying up to watch movies together. A year later, I proposed to her in the same park where we had our first date, and her eyes filled with tears of joy as she said yes. We tied the knot, and our life together truly began. Our daughter Emily arrived shortly after we got married, and from the very moment she entered our lives, she brought us immeasurable joy. Watching her grow, taking her first steps and uttering her first words, was nothing short of magical. Sarah and I shared responsibilities. While I worked in an office, Sarah took care of Emily and juggled a part-time job at a cafe. One typical evening, after a long day at the office, I returned home to the warm, inviting aroma of Sarah's cooking. "Dad's home!" Emily shouted, racing to the door to greet me. I scooped her up and hugged her tightly. "How was your day, sweetheart?" I asked. "It was great. Mom and I baked cookies, and I saved some for you," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I smiled and kissed her forehead. "I can't wait to try them." Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. "Welcome home, Mark. Dinner's almost ready," she said. "Thanks, Sarah. It smells incredible," I replied, walking over to give her a quick kiss. Dinner time held a special place in our hearts. We would gather around the table to share stories about our day and enjoy the delicious meals Sarah prepared. That evening was no exception. We laughed and talked, and it felt like all the stress from work just melted away in their company. After dinner, it was time for Emily's bath. She loved splashing around and playing with her bath toys. I would sit by the tub, asking her about her day at school and what new things she learned. "Dad, did you know that stars are really far away?" she said, her eyes wide with wonder. "I did know that," I replied, smiling. "And did you know that you can see the light from stars that are millions of years old?" "Wow, that's so cool," she exclaimed, splashing water in excitement. Once Emily was all clean and ready for bed, Sarah and I would tuck her in and read her a bedtime story. Her favorite was a tale about a brave little rabbit who embarked on adventures. As she drifted off to sleep, I would watch her and feel a deep sense of contentment. Afterward, Sarah and I enjoyed some quiet time together on the couch, sipping coffee and reflecting on our day. She would share stories about her shift at the cafe and the funny customers she encountered. I'd recount my workday and the challenges I faced. "Mark, I'm so proud of you," Sarah said one night, resting her head on my shoulder. "You work so hard, and you're such a wonderful father and husband." I smiled and kissed the top of her head. "I couldn't do it without you, Sarah. You and Emily make everything worthwhile." Those moments of closeness and understanding formed the backbone of our happy family life. Little did I know, everything I held dear was about to change. But for now, I cherish those precious moments, grateful for the love and joy they brought into my life. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those rare days when I had some free time to spend with Emily. Now in middle school, I treasured every moment we could share. We were settled in the living room, watching a movie, when I noticed she seemed unusually quiet and distracted. "Emily, is everything okay?" I asked, turning to look at her. She hesitated, taking a deep breath. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you." A knot formed in my stomach. "What is it, sweetheart?" Well, she began, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, I saw Mom in town the other day. She was with a man, and they seemed really close. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by really close? They were talking and laughing like they knew each other really well, Emily explained, her voice barely above a whisper. It didn't look like just a friendly chat. I tried to keep calm, but my mind was racing. Sarah had always been so dedicated to our family, could it be possible she was having an affair? I needed to uncover the truth, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Thank you for telling me, Emily, I said, pulling her into a reassuring hug. I'll look into it. Over the next few days, I began to notice small things I had previously overlooked. Sarah was often on her phone, smiling and laughing at her messages. She started coming home later than usual, and whenever I asked her about it, she would brush it off, saying she had extra shifts at the cafe. One evening, I decided it was time to address the situation directly. We were sitting in the kitchen, and Emily was in her room working on homework. Sarah, can we talk for a minute? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course, Mark. What's on your mind? She replied, glancing up from her phone. I had noticed Sarah spending an increasing amount of time on her phone lately and coming home later than usual. Is everything okay? I asked, hoping my voice wouldn't reveal the anxiety churning inside me. Sarah seemed taken aback. Everything's fine. Work has just been busy, and I've been chatting with some friends, she replied. I wanted to believe her, but Emily's words echoed in my mind, unsettling me. I decided to hire a private investigator. I needed to uncover the truth before confronting her again. A week later, the investigator handed me a folder, and my hands shook as I opened it to reveal photos. My worst fears were confirmed. Sarah was indeed having an affair, and her lover was none other than Eric, one of my closest high school friends. The betrayal hit me hard. How could she do this? How could he? That evening, after putting Emily to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at the damning photos. I knew it was time to confront Sarah. Sarah, we need to talk, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. She sat down across from me, worry etched on her face. What's wrong, Mark? Taking a deep breath, I handed her the photos. I know about you and Eric. Sarah's face went pale as she looked at the images. Mark, I can explain. Explain what? I interrupted. How you betrayed our family. How you lied to me. My anger was rising, but I fought to keep my cool. Why, Sarah? Why Eric? Tears filled her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen. We just grew close. I felt lonely, Mark. You were always working, and I needed someone to talk to. Her words stung, but I couldn't deny that my work had affected our relationship. Still, that didn't justify her actions. I don't know what to say, I replied, my voice cracking. I trusted you, Sarah. I trusted Eric. How could you do this? She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. I'm sorry, Mark. I really am. Sorry isn't enough, I said as I stood up. We need to figure out what happens next, especially for Emily. That night marked the beginning of the end. Our once happy family life lay in ruins, and I understood that nothing would ever be the same. Yet, I had to stay strong for Emily. She needed me more than ever, and I was determined to be there for her through it all. In the days following Sarah's confession, I was engulfed in a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and confusion. I couldn't eat, sleep, or focus at work. My mind kept replaying the moment I handed her those photos, her guilt-ridden expression, and her feeble attempts at explanation. I realized I needed more than just a confrontation. I had to understand why this had happened and what had driven Sarah to betray our family. I decided to dig deeper and uncover the entire truth. One evening, after putting Emily to bed, I sat down with Sarah in the living room. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but I had to know more. "Sarah, I need you to be honest with me," I said, striving to keep my voice steady. "How long has this been going on?" She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "It's been about 6 months," she admitted softly. 6 months. I repeated, the words heavy on my tongue. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did it have to come to this?" "I didn't know how to tell you," she replied, tears brimming in her eyes. I felt so alone. "You were always working late, and I just needed someone to talk to. Eric was there, and it just happened." I took a deep breath, trying to process her words. "So you turned to my best friend? Did you ever consider how this would affect Emily? How this would destroy our family?" Sarah sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you or Emily. I just felt so lost." Her tears didn't affect me as they once would have. I had to prioritize Emily and what was best for her. "We need to figure out what happens next, especially for Emily's sake." In the days that followed, I reached out to a lawyer to discuss our options. The thought of divorce weighed heavily on me, but I couldn't see any other way forward. I also spoke to the private investigator again, asking him to gather more evidence. I wanted to ensure I had everything I needed to protect Emily and myself. A week later, the investigator handed me another folder. This one didn't just contain photos, it also included transcripts of messages exchanged between Sarah and Eric. As I read through them, my heart sank even further. The messages overflowed with flirtation, secret meetings, and plans for the future, plans that didn't involve me. That evening, I called my closest friends together, including Eric, at a local bar where we had shared countless good times over the years. I wanted to confront Eric in front of everyone to ensure he couldn't deny what he had done. As we sat around the table, I tried to keep the conversation light, but my mind was laser-focused on the task ahead. After a few drinks, I knew it was time. "Eric," I began, my voice steady but laced with anger, "I know about you and Sarah." The room fell silent, and Eric's face drained of color as he stared at me. "What are you talking about, Mark?" "Don't play dumb," I shot back, pulling out the photos and messages. "I have all the proof I need. You've been having an affair with my wife." Our friends looked shocked, unable to comprehend what they were hearing. Eric stammered, desperately trying to formulate an excuse. "Mark, I didn't mean for this to happen. It just did." "That's not good enough," I replied, my voice rising. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our friendship." One of our friends, Jake, tried to intervene. "Mark, let's not do this here. We can talk about it later." "No," I said firmly. "We're talking about it now. Eric, I want you to explain yourself." Eric looked down, shame washing over him. "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, Mark." "I really am," Eric pleaded, but I cut him off. "Sorry won't fix this," I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. "We're done. Our friendship is over, and Sarah and I are getting a divorce. I just hope you realize the weight of what you've done." The rest of the evening faded into a blur. As I left the bar, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Confronting Eric had been necessary, but it didn't erase the pain I felt. As I walked home, my thoughts drifted to Emily and how I would protect her from the fallout of this mess. When I got back, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, waiting for me. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I confronted Eric," I said, sinking down beside her. "He admitted everything. We're getting a divorce, Sarah. It's the only way forward." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I understand, Mark. I'm so sorry for everything." I didn't have the strength to comfort her. My priority was Emily and ensuring she emerged from this as unscathed as possible. "We'll figure out the details tomorrow. For now, let's just try to get some sleep." That night, as I lay in bed, I pondered our future. I knew it would be a long, difficult road ahead, but I had to remain strong for Emily. She was my world, and I would do anything to protect her. The morning after confronting Eric, I woke up with a heavy heart. The reality of what had happened was settling in, and I understood that the hardest part was still ahead. Sarah and I needed to break the news to Emily about the divorce, and I had to finalize the legal details. My mind raced with thoughts about how to shield my daughter from the emotional fallout of our broken family. That evening, I sat down with Sarah to discuss how we would tell Emily. We need to be honest with her, but we also have to be gentle, I said. She's already been through so much. Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. I know. I hate that we're putting her through this, but she deserves to know the truth. We called Emily into the living room, and she sensed something was wrong immediately. What's going on, Dad? Mom. I took a deep breath and held her hand. Emily, your mom and I have something to tell you. We've decided to get a divorce. Tears filled Emily's eyes. Why? Why are you getting a divorce? Sweetheart, Sarah squeezed Emily's other hand, your dad and I have been having some problems. We still love you very much, but we can't stay together. Emily looked at me, searching for answers. Is it because of that man I saw you with? My throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. Your mom made a mistake, and it's not something we can fix. But this isn't your fault. We both love you so much and will always be here for you. Emily burst into tears, and Sarah and I held her close as she cried. Watching my little girl in so much pain was one of the hardest moments of my life. I wished I could take all of it away, but I understood that the only way forward was through the truth. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers and discussions about custody arrangements. Sarah and I agreed that Emily would stay with me during the week and spend weekends with her. We wanted to make the transition as smooth as possible for her. One evening, after a particularly tough day, I sat down with my closest friend, Jake, who had been a rock throughout this ordeal. We met at our usual bar, the same place where I had confronted Eric. How are you holding up, Mark? Jake asked, taking a sip of his beer. It's been tough, I admitted. Telling Emily was the hardest part. She's so confused and hurt. Jake nodded. I can't imagine how hard this must be for you, but you're doing the right thing by being honest with her. I hope so, I said, staring into my drink. I just want her to know that she's loved and that none of this is her fault. She knows, Mark. You're a great dad. She'll get through this because she has you, Jake reassured me. Hearing those words provided a bit of comfort. I needed to believe that, despite the pain, Emily and I would emerge stronger on the other side. When I got home, I found Sarah packing her things. We had decided it would be best for her to move out and stay with her mother until we figured out the next steps. It was a painful process, but necessary. Do you need any help? I asked, standing in the doorway of our bedroom. Sarah looked up, her eyes red from crying. No, I've got it. Thank you, Mark, for everything. I nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. I hope you find what you're looking for, Sarah. I really do. As she left, the house felt emptier than ever. I sat in the living room, trying to process everything that had happened. My heart ached, but I knew I had to stay strong for Emily. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Emily making breakfast. She was trying to keep things as normal as possible, and I admired her strength. Good morning, Dad, she said, offering a weak smile. I made pancakes. I pulled her into a tight hug. Thank you, Emily. That means a lot. We sat down to eat, and for a moment, it felt like things might be okay. We talked about her school, her friends, and the little things that made up our daily lives. It was a small comfort in the midst of the storm, but it reminded me that no matter what, we still had each other. As the days turned into weeks, we slowly began to find our new normal. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of sadness and anger, but we were moving forward together. I concentrated on being there for Emily, ensuring she felt loved and supported. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, she looked up at me and said, "Dad, I'm glad we have each other." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my heart. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." We were still a family, and that was all that truly mattered. The weeks following our decision to divorce were among the hardest of my life. Sarah had moved out and was staying with her mother, leaving Emily and me to adjust to our new reality. Every day felt like a struggle to find a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. Sarah and I had agreed to keep things as amicable as possible for Emily's sake, so we sat down with our lawyers to work out the details of the divorce, custody arrangements, division of assets, and child support. All of it had to be figured out. One afternoon, we met at the lawyer's office to finalize some paperwork. The atmosphere was tense but civil. "Mark and Sarah, please have a seat," our lawyer, Mr. Thompson, said as we entered the room. We sat down, and he handed each of us a stack of papers. "These are the final agreements for your review. If everything looks good, we can move forward with the filing." Sarah glanced at the documents and then turned to me. "Mark, I want you to know that I'll always be grateful for the years we spent together. I'm sorry for everything." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I appreciate that, Sarah. I really do. Let's just focus on what's best for Emily." We went through the papers, signing where needed. It felt surreal, like I was signing away a part of my life, but I knew it was the right thing to do, for Emily, for myself, and even for Sarah. After we left the lawyer's office, we stood outside for a moment. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city. "Mark, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask," Sarah said softly. "Thanks, Sarah. Take care of yourself," I replied, trying to muster a smile as she walked away. I felt a mix of sadness and relief. The chapter of my life with Sarah was closing, but a new one was beginning, one where Emily and I would navigate the challenges ahead. Back at home, I focused on creating a stable environment for Emily. We established a new routine, and I made sure to spend as much quality time with her as possible. We cooked meals together, watched movies, and went for walks in the park. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, Emily looked up at me with a serious expression. "Dad, do you think things will ever feel normal again?" she asked. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't know, Emily, but I do know that we'll find a new normal together. It might take some time, but we'll get there." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I hope so. I miss how things used to be." "Me too, sweetheart," I said, squeezing her hand. "But we have each other, and that's what matters most." As the weeks turned into months, the divorce became final. Sarah and I continued to co-parent Emily as best as we could. We attended her school events, celebrated her achievements, and made sure she knew she was loved by both of us. Of course, there were difficult moments, days when the weight of the situation felt too heavy to bear, but there were also moments of joy and hope, like the time Emily and I baked cookies together and ended up covered in flour, laughing until our sides hurt, or the day we spent at the beach building sandcastles and splashing in the waves. One night, as I was tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, I know things are different now, but I'm glad we're getting through it together," she said. I smiled, feeling a swell of pride and love for my daughter. "Me too, Emily. Me too." As I turned off the light and closed her bedroom door, I realized that while our family had changed, the love and bond we shared remained strong. We were building a new life, one day at a time, and I knew that together, we could face whatever the future held. 6 months had passed since the divorce was finalized, and life was starting to settle into a new routine. Emily and I had found a rhythm that worked for us. We were healing little by little, and our home was beginning to feel warm and welcoming again. I was doing my best to keep things stable for Emily, ensuring she felt loved and secure. One Saturday morning, we enjoyed a quiet day at home. Emily was drawing at the kitchen table while I read the newspaper. The phone rang, breaking the peaceful silence. "Hello." I answered, expecting it to be a telemarketer or a friend. "Brian, it's your mom," came the urgent voice on the other end. "Sarah and her mother just showed up at our house. They're demanding to see you. They're saying something about money you owe them." My heart sank. What could they possibly want now? "I'll be there as soon as I can, Mom. Keep them outside if you can." I hung up the phone and turned to Emily. "Sweetheart, I need to go to Grandma and Grandpa's for a bit. It's an emergency. Will you be okay here for a little while?" Emily looked up from her drawing, concern in her eyes. "Is everything all right, Dad?" "It will be, honey. I just need to sort something out. I'll be back soon." I reassured her with a quick hug before heading out the door. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found Sarah and her mother standing in the living room, looking tense and impatient. My parents were nearby, their faces a mix of concern and frustration. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah stepped forward, her expression serious. "Mark, we need the money you owe us, the loan I gave you before the divorce." I frowned, feeling confused and irritated. "What loan? We settled everything in the divorce agreement. There's no money I owe you." Her mother chimed in, her voice sharp. "You need to repay the 1.5 million yen. We need it now." My father, who had remained silent until that moment, spoke up. "This is ridiculous. Sarah, you were the one who had the affair. Mark owes you nothing. You have no right to come here and make demands." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "Brian, please. I'm struggling. I need the money." I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. "Sarah, I understand you're having a hard time, but this isn't the way to handle it. We agreed on the settlement, and I've honored that. You can't just show up and demand more money." Then, suddenly, Sarah fell to her knees, begging. "Please, Mark. I have to pay compensation to Eric's wife too. I can't do this alone." Just as the tension in the room reached its peak, my father stepped forward, holding out an envelope. "Here," he said, handing it to Sarah. "Take this and leave." Sarah and her mother grabbed the envelope and left without another word. As soon as they stepped outside, I heard their angry shouts. They had realized the envelope contained fake money from an old board game. Moments later, we called the police, and Sarah and her mother were arrested for trespassing and causing a disturbance. The neighbors gathered outside, watching the scene unfold. Back inside, I sat down, exhausted. My parents were beside me, their faces showing a mix of relief and concern. "Are you all right, Mark?" my mother asked gently. "Yeah, Mom, I think so," I replied, rubbing my temples. "I'm just glad it's over." Later that evening, back home with Emily, I tried to put on a brave face. She noticed the strain in my eyes and came over to sit beside me on the couch. "Dad, what happened today?" she asked softly. I sighed and wrapped my arm around her. "Your mom came by asking for money. It was a tough situation, but it's handled now." Emily hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you're okay, Dad." I held her close, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." As we sat together, I realized how strong we had become. Despite everything, we were moving forward. The bond between us was unbreakable, and together we could face anything. The incident with Sarah and her mother marked a turning point for Emily and me. It signified the end of the turmoil and the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. We were determined to build a future filled with hope and happiness. Days turned into weeks, and we slowly adjusted to our new reality. I focused on creating a stable and loving environment for Emily. We established new routines that brought comfort and consistency to our lives. One Saturday morning, we decided to visit the local park. It was one of our favorite spots, a place where we could relax and enjoy each other's company. As we walked along the path, with the sun shining down on us, Emily looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, do you think things will get better from now on?" I smiled and ruffled her hair. "Yes, sweetheart, I do. We're strong, and we have each other. We'll get through anything together." We found a bench by the pond and sat down, watching the ducks swim by. The peaceful scene gave us a sense of calm and reassurance. "You know," Emily said after a while, "I'm really proud of you. You've been so strong through all of this." Her words touched my heart. "Thanks, Emily. I'm proud of you too. You've been so brave." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence for a few moments. It was one of those simple, perfect moments that reminded me of what truly mattered. That evening, we decided to try something new. I had found a recipe for homemade pizza, and we thought it would be fun to make it together. We gathered the ingredients and got to work in the kitchen. "Okay, Chef Emily," I said, handing her an apron. "What toppings should we put on our pizza?" She giggled and thought for a moment. "How about pepperoni, mushrooms, and extra cheese?" "Sounds delicious," I replied, rolling out the dough. "Let's get to it." We spread the sauce, sprinkled the cheese, and added the toppings, laughing and chatting as we worked. When the pizza was finally in the oven, we high-fived each other, proud of our creation. As we waited for the pizza to bake, we set the table and talked about our plans for the future. Emily had big dreams, and I wanted to support her every step of the way. "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be a veterinarian," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "That's a wonderful goal, Emily. I know you'll be great at it," I said, feeling a swell of pride. The oven timer beeped, and we pulled out our perfectly baked pizza. We sat down to eat, savoring every bite. It wasn't just a meal, it was a symbol of our resilience and our ability to find joy in the little things. After dinner, we settled on the couch to watch a movie. As the credits rolled, Emily snuggled close to me, her head resting on my chest. "Thanks for always being there for me, Dad," she whispered. "Always, Emily," I replied, kissing the top of her head. "We're a team." As we drifted off to sleep, I reflected on how far we had come. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew we could face it together. Our bond was unbreakable, and that gave me the strength to keep moving forward. In the months that followed, we continued to build our new life. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and all the little moments in between. We surrounded ourselves with friends and family who loved and supported us. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and we were determined to make the most of it. One afternoon, while we were baking cookies, Emily looked up at me with a smile. "Dad, do you think Mom will ever be happy again?" I paused, considering her question. "I hope so, Emily. Everyone deserves to find happiness, even if it takes time." She nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're right." As we pulled the cookies out of the oven, I realized how much we had both grown. We had faced challenges and heartache, but we had come out stronger on the other side. Moving forward, I knew that no matter what happened, we would always have each other, and that was enough. As the days passed, Emily and I settled into our new routines with a growing sense of stability. I took on more activities to ensure that our days were filled with laughter and connection. One Saturday, we decided to host a small gathering for some of Emily's friends from school. I wanted her to feel a sense of normalcy, surrounded by familiar faces. The day of the gathering, Emily was bubbling with excitement. We baked cupcakes together, each adding our own unique decorations, her bright colors and sprinkles, and my attempt at simple, classic frosting. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, the laughter and chatter filled the air, bringing warmth to our home. Once the cupcakes were decorated, we set up the living room with cozy blankets and pillows, creating a perfect space for a movie marathon. Emily invited a few friends over, and soon the house was filled with the sounds of giggles and chatter. I made popcorn and offered drinks, feeling a sense of joy as I watched Emily interact with her friends. "Dad, can we watch the latest superhero movie?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Of course. That's what we're here for," I replied, settling onto the couch as the girls clustered together with excitement. The movie began, and I couldn't help but smile as I watched them enjoy themselves, their laughter echoing through the house. As the credits rolled and the girls cheered, I felt a sense of pride in what we had created together. After the movie, they decided to play some games, and I took the opportunity to step back, giving them space while I cleaned up the kitchen. Listening to their laughter and shouts reminded me of the joy that still existed in our lives despite the challenges we had faced. Later that evening, as the last of Emily's friends left, I could see the happiness radiating from her. "Thanks for today, Dad. That was so much fun," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. "I loved having my friends over." "I'm glad you enjoyed it, Emily. We should do it more often," I said, hugging her tightly. The following week brought a wave of excitement, as Emily had a school project due that required her to create a presentation about animals, particularly focusing on her aspiration to be a veterinarian. I was thrilled to help her with research and planning. We spent hours at the library and online, gathering facts and images, discussing everything from animal habitats to proper care techniques. As the project came together, I marveled at Emily's passion. She was so knowledgeable about the subject, and her enthusiasm was infectious. "I can't wait to present this to my class," she said, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "You're going to do amazing, sweetheart. Just remember to speak from your heart," I encouraged. When the day of the presentation arrived, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement as we arrived at school. Emily was dressed neatly, her poster board clutched tightly in her hands. I watched her walk into the classroom, her back straight and her head held high. She was ready to shine. Later that day, when I picked her up, she rushed to the car, her face glowing. "Dad! I did it! I got a great response, and everyone loved my presentation," she exclaimed, bursting with pride. "I knew you would," I said, feeling a swell of pride for her accomplishments. "You've worked hard, and it paid off." As we drove home, I reflected on how far we had come since the divorce. The pain was still present, but the laughter and love we shared were growing stronger. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but together, Emily and I were building a new life filled with hope, joy, and resilience. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel to watch my next videos and share with me your opinion, what you would do in my place.